Okay, good morning. So, in case, Alan, you thought we didn't exhaust the subject of alkane, we still have a little bit more to do. I really don't want to spend too much time on it, but I do want to complete the picture. So we left off was um, Rabbi Avraham Dovid Lavut in the Shema Koilo, making the case that the alkane is in bold because that's the primary statement here. The Kiddush Friday night is we take upon ourselves the Kiddush. Shabbos day Hashem responds and Hashem blesses. And therefore, in the Friday night Kiddush, the Yom Hashishi, that paragraph doesn't have the name Yud Hey and the Vav and the Hey. It has Elakim. And we say by Kaddish, Oisoi, he sanctified it without saying God sanctified it. But Shabbos day we say Al Kem Beirach Hashem, therefore God invoking the name Yud Hey and the Vav and the Hey, the name Havaya, indicating that the transcendent bestows his sanctity on the Shabbos in response to our effort of Friday night. That's what we discussed. And therefore, because of that, the Al Kem Beirach is in bold because that's the main statement. That was Rabbi Lavut's contention. Rabbi Avraham Chaim Naeh responded by saying, I don't know what you're talking about. Which print are you talking about? Which print are you talking about that the alkane is in bold? He says, look, the Siddurim, the prints of the Alter Rebbe Siddur that are available to me, and he gives a whole list of them, only one of them has the alkane in bold, not the other ones. And then he challenges Rabbi Lavut and says, look, we have to first see the prints that were printed in the Alter Rebbe's time, and let's look at those. And if the alkane is bold over there, good. If not, leave the alkane not bolded, because bolding it can make someone lead to a mistake. What's the mistake it could lead to? That a person might begin with alkane and not read the paragraph before. Now he says, although I don't think that saying the alkane in the middle is a problem in terms of there's a halacha that one is not allowed to recite a half a verse, says Rabbi Chaim Naeh, I don't think that that's an issue, as the Mishnah Berurah said is an issue. I don't think it's a major issue because the issue of reciting half verses is only when you're reading of the Torah and when you're officially splitting a verse in half. But when you're just saying your half verses as part of prayer, it's not a problem. So I don't think there's a major problem with reciting from alkane, considering that alkane is in the middle of a verse. But because the word alkane means therefore, it has no contextual meaning if it's not preempted by the verse before. And you, says Rabbi Naeh to Rabbi Lavut, you by putting the alkane in bold are actually making people make the mistake of beginning the Kiddush with alkane. Not a major problem, but it doesn't contextually sound correct to begin a statement with therefore without a preamble. That was the discussion, yeah? Okay. So before I continue, I had a conversation with someone whom I met through one of these like online Torah discussion groups, where I asked on this group if anybody has access to old prints of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, because I understood that in the time that Rabbi Lavut was working with the Alter Rebbe Siddur, the original prints were not available. Certainly Rabbi Naeh says it's not available. And I know that for many years, the original prints of the Alter Rebbe Siddur were not available. In fact, the fifth Rebbe of Chabad said that I worked very hard trying to get my hands on a copy of the fifth Rebbe of Chabad. Come in. He said I worked very hard. Morning. He said I worked very hard trying to get my hands on a print, on a copy of the first print of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, and I couldn't find one. So it was very difficult to find. But maybe since the Rebbe Rashab and there's all kinds of new archives open, maybe someone has it available. Fine. So I asked them one of these groups, and it led to a whole discussion. And someone made the point to me that I should have noticed on my own, which is the Pri Eitz Chaim. We cited to the Pri Eitz Chaim. Pri Eitz Chaim, remember, is the prodigal student of the Arizal transcribing the Arizal's teachings, right? And that was one of the sources from some of the paragraphs that we say before we make the bracha hagafen on Shabbos day Kiddush. There, you may remember, he says to say certain verses. We say much more. For example, he says to say the verse Os Tasaneg al Hashem. We start earlier V'Shamru. So we have that line Os Tasaneg, but we add some verses before. In the Pri Eitz Chaim also, he says to say alkane. He doesn't say to start with kisheshes, which means if you were following the prescription of the Pri Eitz Chaim, you actually would begin with alkane. You'd be saying other things before. You'd be saying Visham, you'd be saying let's look it up again. But you'd be saying Astasaneg, you'd be saying Dahi Sudasa, you'd be saying Bismillah David Hashem Esar, but you'd be saying Al Kain, you would not start from Kisheshes. So if Rabbi Chaim Naeh is concerned with people beginning with Al Kain, they have legs to stand on. The Pri Etz Chaim says to start with Al Kain. And I'm sure there are some communities that follow the Pri Etz Chaim strictly and would begin with Al Kain and without saying the first half of the verse, Kisheshes. That's point A. Now, point 2 is, it really bothered me because Rabbi Lavut himself says, and I have to defend my ancestors, my great-great-great-grandfather. He says that the reason why Al Kain is in bold is because this is the main point. And Rabbi Noah takes him to task and says, which Siddur are you talking about? What are you saying that's in bold? You never saw the prints of the Alter that were there when the Alter made the Siddur. In fact, in the Rabbi Lavut's introduction to Shar al-Kollel, he himself says, look, the prints that were up until my day of the Alter Siddur have tons of mistakes. Therefore, I'm going to collect it, put it together, and give you the proper, version of the Alter Siddur, which means he himself is saying that the Siddur he's looking at have mistakes. So what is he talking about when he says Al Kain? That Al Kain is in bold? It's such an obvious question. And why doesn't he say, the whole thing's funny. Like, what did Rabbi Lavut mean when he said that the Al Kain is in bold? What's he talking about? I think I have the answer. But before I get there, let's go through what we did find in terms of the Alter Rebbe's first printing and see what's going on there. And I think you'll just see how I led to my conclusion. Okay, we clear where we are? Yeah?
I just never agreed with you. You can't start a paragraph saying therefore.
Okay, that was Rabbi Noah's claim. You can't start a paragraph saying therefore, but it should be noted that the Pri Etz Chaim says you do that. The Pri Etz Chaim says you do that. You say, I think it's Astasaneg. You say Mizmor Hashem Le'esar, Astasaneg, Doi Sidasa, and then Al Kain, without saying the statement before Al Kain. So, however you deal with it, the people who have the practice of beginning with Al Kain have what to rely on. The Eitz Chaim says to do that. Oh. Okay, so let's see. So we're looking at the first page there is recently. So as I mentioned, the fifth Chabad Rebbe said that I was working very hard to get my hands on a copy of the first print of the Alter Siddur, and I couldn't do it. Now, in recent years, the Russians took much of the archive that they confiscated from the Chabad Rebbe's, and they put a lot of it on display in Moscow. Very contentious issue. The Rebbe felt very strongly that the library belongs to the Rebbe's and it belongs in New York. This is a matter that's still in the court still today. The State Department in the U.S. is heavily involved in this story. You can Google the case. It's a very, very serious case about the Americans applying pressure on the Russians to release these manuscripts.
Very great lawyer. I think it's Levin who's in charge of it.
Nat Lewin.
Yeah.
Nat Lewin is heavily involved, and other lawyers.
He's a remarkable constitutional lawyer.
Yeah. So it's made it to the highest echelons of U.S. State Department dealing with this. But nonetheless, in recent years, they made a lot of the manuscripts available, some of it online, and they made the following document online. It's a copy of a Siddur. Now look at the first picture there. This handwriting on the first box there is the previous Rebbe's handwriting. Now what it says is Siddur Admor. That's top right there. It says Siddur Admor, the Siddur of the Rebbe, meaning Alter Rebbe Siddur. And then it says Kinira. It would seem Tfus Shklov. It seems that this is from the printing of Shklov. Now we know from other sources that the first printing of Alter Rebbe Siddur was in Shklov. The previous Rebbe says this. The Rebbe writes about this. That his grandfather Rabbi Lavut writes this in his introduction that the first printing was in Shklov. In fact, there was 3 printings that were done during Alter Rebbe's lifetime, Shklov, and 2 in, I can't remember, 2 in a different city, but 1 in Shklov, Shklov being the first one. Okay, so the previous Rebbe writes here that it seems that this copy of this manuscript is the print of Shklov. Now, unfortunately, this manuscript does not have a title page. We don't know where it was printed, which is why the previous Rebbe doesn't state explicitly, this is from Shklov. He says it seems as from Shklov because the previous Rebbe himself must have got a hold of it. And based on his understanding, I guess his research or his knowledge of Siddurim, that this is the Shklov printing. So he writes on the cover, this seems to me to be the Shklov printing. Follow? Which means it seems that this is the first printing that ever existed in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime. Which means the 5th Chabad Rebbe says, I couldn't get my hand on it. But his son, the 6th Chabad Rebbe, did get his hand on it. and he writes on the cover, it seems that this is the Shklov printing. Okay, so going with that, and assuming that this is the first printing of the Alter Rebbe Siddur, let's see what it says by the Kiddush page. Okay, so it begins with V'shomru, see? And V'shomru b'nei Yisrael Shabbos. Then it says, Im Tosher b'Shabbos Lagracha. And then it says, Askinu Sudasa, the Masa Shalmasa, the Chavas, the Mak Kadisha, Askinu Sudasa, the Makadoy, Sudasa, the Kadisha, Zachar Shabbos Kachai, Sheshes Yomim, Vayam Ashvi Shabbos Hashem Lakacha. And then it keeps on going. Top of the next page. Ki Sheshim Asa Shem Shemaim Vasoretz. Es Yom Es Kol Asher Bom V'Yenach Mashvi. Al Kain Beirach Hashem Shabbos Kadishayu. The Al Kain is not in bold. So the first print of the Alter Rebbe Siddur does not have the Al Kain in bold. So if Rabbi Naeh is looking to Rabbi Lavut and saying, what prints are you talking about when you say that the Al Kain is bold? We have to get a copy of the Siddur that were there by the Alter Rebbe's time and see if the Alter Rebbe's Siddur had it in bold. Here, at least the first print of the Alter Rebbe Siddur does not have it in bold, which strengthened the question that Rabbi Naeh presents to Rabbi Lavut. But what is interesting is, you'll notice before the Al Kain, you see the two dots there.
Yeah.
It's not middle. It's the middle of the pasuk. Why is there two dots there? The pasuk's not over. So even though like Al Kain is not bold, it is separated, which is interesting. I'm not sure why that is. Because it's one long pasuk. The pasuk begins with Ki Sheshim Asa Hashem Shemaim Vasoretz, because in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, the ocean and all that's in it, and he rested on the seventh. Therefore, he blessed the Sabbath and. Right, so the Al Kain is part of the previous verse. So even though it's not bold, it is separated, whatever that means.
Separate the Shabbat from the week, even in the.
He's cutting the verse in half, so I don't know what that means. Okay, but more importantly, yes, it's almost like a pause. So if we are going to give credence to the way, first of all, is there a Siddur there? Is there a Siddur on the thing there? No. Because the Kiddush, okay, this Siddur, as I mentioned before, Rabbi Lavut himself says, and I'm sorry, this keeps on happening. And I'm trying to, one second. There we go. I'm pulling it up on the page here. Okay, I have it, Judge. So first of all, Rabbi Lavut himself says that the original printings had mistakes, which is why I'm putting together a new text, right? Right? Mm-hmm. And moreover, the Siddur we have does not align with this Siddur. Because look at the Siddur earlier. How did it start? What was the first paragraph? The Shomru. Okay? And then Im Toshuv. And then Askinu Sudasa was after Im Toshuv, right? You see in this printing? Thank you. Here, you can look at it on page. Look at page 248. You can follow along. I have it on my computer here. So this paragraph goes like this: V'shomru Im Toshuv, then Askinu. Our Siddur says Mizmor David Askinu and then V'shomru. So this Siddur does not align with the way we have it, right? Which means it's clear from everything that the first printings of the Alter Rebbe Siddur were not accurate, which is why they printed it again. This is supposed to be the first. It's the first printing.
Oh, we know for a fact.
Yes, yes. Oh, well, we assume so, considering the comment in the top for the previous Rebbe, where it says that this is the printing of Shklov, right? So it's clear that this printing wasn't correct. And you have to imagine it like this: the Alter Rebbe takes a manuscript. He himself didn't oversee the printing. He put a manuscript and gave it to a publisher. The publisher does whatever he wants with it. And then it comes back and Alter was like, oh, hold on a second, that's not good. Cancel that print, but it's too late. There's already a cat's out of the bag. There's 100 copies somewhere, who knows where, 500 copies. Okay, let's do a rerun. And right, and very quickly, it's not like today where you can like manage these things. The printing wasn't necessarily in his town. This happened in Shklov. Alter was living in Liadi. It doesn't necessarily mean that he's able to like oversee the printing. So, which further pushes the question. The whole discussion is so strange. Lavut says that this is why it's bold. Al Kain is bold on purpose, because it's the main point. Rabbi Naeh says, well, you should get a hold of the Alter Rebbe Siddur and see what's going on there. Really? Even if we did get a hold of the Siddur that were printed in the Alter Rebbe's time, does it help us? And look, we're looking at this one. The Al Kain is not bold, and we see mistakes clearly because it's not in the correct order. So what is going on? Furthermore, let's look at the next print here. At the bottom of it's all going to become clear when I'm done. I'm just piling on the questions, which made me lead to my conclusion, which you'll see in a second. So on the bottom of the page there, you see there's two pages that are right side by side. Okay, so those are the on the left is the title page of a Siddur printed, as you can see the date, there's 1832. In Hebrew, Tov Kuf Tzadik Beis, Nitfas Bekopos, that's the city Kopos.
Mhm.
This is the printing, 1852, is after the Alter Rebbe passes away. It's after the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Alter Rebbe passed away in 1812. His son oversaw a new printing of the Siddur in 1832 in Kopos. It would seem to me, I think, that this is the printing upon which Rabbi Lavut relied and made his commentary of the Shara Koilo. So on this print, okay? Now look at on the right there, yeah? On the second page on the right.
Mine is with somebody who supervised.
Yes, so that was the point here. So what does he write? So the left is like the title page, and then the inside is like the inside cover, right? You know, sometimes you have to have two covers, right? So it says like this: Siddur Tefillah Mikol Hashana, the order of prayer for all year long. This is a better version than the Siddurim that were printed till now. In Biyofi at first of all, the beauty of the print, it's going to be a nicer print. Ayin Ra'ayu, the eye will see it. Tashru, one will be pleased. That's reason number one why this is a better print. It's going to be clearer. Number two, Oy Be'inyan Haga Meduyekes, and also because of our scrupulous emendation and editing. What's the word? Editing work. Hushmu ein hashkacha. And we did this because we were very scrupulous to make sure the text was correct, because many of the earlier prints had mistakes. So the Alter Rebbe passes away in 1812. There's 3 printings in his lifetime, all of which were mistaken, says the cover of this printing, and therefore the son comes and says, okay, we got to fix this all up. And in 1832, he makes a new printing. It's going to be clear page, clearer text, and no mistakes. And this is the print that Rabbi Lavut relies on in his commentary. Now let's look at the Alkane. On the next page. So the left there, on the next page on the left in the top, it says in small letters there, Seder Kiddush L'Yoyim, the order of Kiddush for the day, Mizmor David Hashem Esther, etc. First of all, he says, put in the paragraph Mizmor David. Then it says Eskin Sudasa. Then it says, top of the right, next page, bottom, the next page is bottom right, Mishamu B'nei Yisrael Shabbos. Right? So the order is the same like ours, which means it corrected that part. Right? The first print had it out of order. It put Askinu before Vishamru before Askinu. And now we're putting Askinu before Vishamru. Okay, so it's correcting the order. You can see that, right? Which is why our Siddur follows it. Yeah, you with me, Alan? Yeah. Then he keeps on going. Vishamru ben Yisrael Shabbos Vis Olam ben Yisrael Oisil Olam Tishesh Yisomim keeps on going. In Tashav Shabbos Aglecha keeps on going. Going Sidasa keeps on going. And then all the way to the bottom, what does it say? Not in bold. No. Now, there is a period before Al Kain, so there is that break in the pasuk. Although I'm not convinced that period is meant to be a break in the pasuk. Why am I not convinced? Because look at the entire paragraph. You don't see any breaks anywhere else in the psukim. It could be that dot there is just to fill out the page, fill out the line, which is not uncommon. But maybe it is a break because you do see some small dots earlier. I don't know. But anyway, the Al Kain is definitely not bold. So which further begs the question, if this is the Siddur that Rabbi Lavut is relying on, why does he say that the Alkane is bold on purpose? The Siddur he's looking at doesn't have the Alkane in bold. The earliest Siddur we found from the Alter Rebbe's, maybe Lavut didn't have the Siddur that was printed in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime, but if Rabbi Noah is challenging Rabbi Lavut to say, find the Siddur that were printed in the Alter Rebbe's lifetime, we found one, the Alkane is not bold.
Well, he could be referring to the period, and that's on a separate line.
He doesn't say so. He says it's bold. Anyway, so I'm looking at this and my head's baffling, especially since Rabbi Lavut in his introduction says, I'm doing this because I know there's mistaken prints. So I'm relying on the print from Kapust in 1832. I'm relying on this one. And that's why I'm writing this whole commentary. So there shouldn't be mistakes, to fix the text, to give reasons behind the text. So he's acknowledging that mistakes in the previous prints. And yet Rabbi Noah is pointing fingers at him and saying, why don't you find the print from the Alter Rebbe's time? So something is missing. And it really bugged me all Shabbos. And then it hit me. When Rabbi Lavut published his commentary on the Shara Koilo, he published it along with a Siddur. The Siddur was called Torah Or. All the printings we have since then copy the Siddur of Torah Or, Chabad Siddurim, because of Rabbi Lavut's work in collecting the earlier prints and the manuscripts and coming together with the proper printing and the reasons in the background. Rabbi Lavut is not saying that the reason why he's not, when he says that's why the Alkane is bold, He's not talking about that's why it's bold in previous prints. He's saying that's why I'm making it bold in my print. It hit me. He's not talking about the previous prints. He's saying, look, because the alkane is the highlight of this whole statement, that's why I'm putting it in bold in my print. And in fact, in the Mishnah Chassidim, he cites to a different Siddur in which it's not printed in bold because bold, again, is up to the printer. The printer can make it bold, make it small. He can put whatever font he wants based on whatever makes it easier. In fact, sometimes, especially, not in these years, but sometimes in later years, when a printer would want to make a Siddur, and he didn't necessarily have all the type keys or took too long to type everything up, what he would do is he would cut out sections of other Siddurim that he thought had the correct version, paste it onto a page, make photocopies, and that was a Siddur. Which is why in some older prints of Siddurim, you have like one paragraph, one font, and the next paragraph is a completely different font. Because in this paragraph, he felt that Siddur had it correct, and that paragraph, that Siddur had it correct. So the printer does whatever he wants in terms of bolding or unbolding. You can't rely on the printer to make a decision. So I think Rabbi Lavut is talking about his own print. And he's saying that's why I'm putting it in bold. But he cites to a book called the Mishnah Chassidim, which is one of the earlier Kabbalistic books, Siddurim, in which the alkane is not in bold. But remember, he said that there's a book called Mishnah Chassidim where the alkane, every single word, has 2 apostrophes inside of it, right? Remember I mentioned this? When you have like an apostrophe inside words, that's a writer's way of saying, highlight these words. So that is not in the printer, that's on the author. And so therefore, Rabbi Lavut is saying, look, I found an author that actually highlights the alkane, and therefore my printing, I'm making it bold. That's what I think is correct here. And now the whole thing falls into place when you think of it this way. Because otherwise, it's really a baffling thing. He's making this claim that that's why it's bold. Rabbi Lavut is like, Rabbi Noah is like, what are you talking about? Why is it bold? Which Siddur are you talking about? And why didn't he say which Siddur I'm talking about? And in fact, the Siddur he had available to him did not have an alkane bold. So why is he saying that? Unless he's talking about his own Siddur. And then it all makes sense. So those are my little closing remarks on this whole discussion. But this is the conclusion of the little rabbit hole.
It's like the word maaseh, for example. You write it in English, you would always put M-A apostrophe A-S-E-I. You know, it makes perfect sense for what you're doing here.
Yeah. So I think he's talking about his own Siddur.
Siddur, exactly.
And I think that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
He's saying that's why I'm bolding it in my Siddur, because I think it's the highlight of the whole service. That's why I'm putting it in bold. He's not commenting on previous prints, because as we saw, the previous prints did not have them in bold. Not even the one the Alter Rebbe's time, the one that we have. And the one that the Alter Rebbe's son worked on to correct the mistakes in the previous ones, which Rabbi Lavut knew the previous ones had mistakes, which is why he's relying on this Siddur. That one did not have the alkane in bold. That's why I think he's talking about his own print. This is the Torah. And I think that would settle this whole entire issue.
It's very brilliant because of the fact that when you think of it, as you were saying, the difficulties of printing at that time, what today, the fact that they finally realized that it had to be supervised for the essence of what
in fact, I mentioned this on Shabbos, that I want to look something up while I'm talking to you.
Please.
Rabbi Yavitz that we're talking about on Shabbos. Oh, let's see. Oh, here we go. This is what I want to see. An old print of Siddur Torah that has a Shara Kodel in it.
No, you want it's in bold.
Yeah, that's what I wanted, a piece of the puzzle. I just assumed that it is, but I'm going to look it up right now. So the Yavitz we're talking about on Shabbos, he had his own printing. He had his own printing house, and he writes, the reason why I'm making my own printing house is because I see other printing houses and they're so lazy, they make mistakes, they get it wrong, and they mess up the people's work. And therefore I'm going to have my own printing house and I'll be able to manage everything myself. Now the end was, he did do that. He managed it himself, and then later writes, I see how hard it is, and I'm sorry mistakes come here too. So it's obviously a very serious thing to have a printing house. Today, of course, with digitalized, it's much easier to do editing and re-editing. Okay, I'm almost there.
It's so excellent that Chabad has its own too.
Sorry?
It's excellent that Chabad has its own.
Yeah, so today, yeah. Well, we have our own publishing house, but I don't know if we have our own printer.
No, but we have our own publishing house. So I would imagine it's supervised all the time.
Yeah, so now, but Rabbi Lavut, okay, let's see. Okay, I'm almost here. Shachar, here we go.
Must be.
I'm still at Shachar. Let's keep on going. Tefillas
It's a very,
Musaf.
very significant job. That was got
When
for
it comes to
printing.
this,
Yes.
Yeah.
But Rabbi Lavut actually had a physical printing press. Rather than have a printing press, actually, they had printing at some point. They weren't
They
printing.
don't do it anymore? The actual printing?
They outsourced the actual printing. I think.
Uh-huh.
I think it's digital today. You can edit everything down. Okay, here we go. Here we are. Tikkun Shabbos. Haskim Sedasa. Scroll down. The big reveal. Okay, he puts Alkain is in bold. Alkain's in bold. I'm assuming he's talking about his own siddur.
Mhm.
That is my assumption. I think that settles the entire score here. Now the question, that whole funniness about like, is it printed in bold or not printed in bold? Which print are you talking about? And why don't you say which print you're talking about? Well, it's obvious. He's talking about his own, because this is a running commentary on his own printing.
Shabbos reflections, though, were very significant for us.
I'm sorry?
Your Shabbos reflections were very significant to us with what you thought through.
Yes, I think this is,
Yeah.
it was bugging me the whole Shabbos until it hit me. And then I ran to the bookshelf to look at what he wrote and to see if there's an indication in his words what he's talking about. He just says, therefore, the Alkain is in bold. He's talking about the Siddur upon which he's commenting. My Siddur, it's in bold.
It reminds me.
Anyway, we'll close out there.
It's excellent because sometimes when you're speaking to your wife or you're speaking to someone it's intimate with you and understands your thinking, you would be. I understand what you said. Therefore, otherwise we would. It's like in the middle, like an hour later, you say to your wife or to somebody who's a friend, and therefore,
Yeah,
and he has to know why you would say that.
I'm going to add something else interesting. Now I'm looking at this print. So he actually indicates where the verses start, because he puts a little ches before Zohar Sim Shabbos Akacha, because it's verse 8 in the chat in the scripture. Then he puts a little test before Sheshishom Tavai Vasisikom Lachtacha, that's verse 9. Then he puts a little yud, Vayemashvi Shabbos Hashem Lakecha. Then he puts a little yud aleph, Ki Sheshishom Os Hashem, all the way through Alkain. So if you're looking at his print, you know it's one verse, because there's no new number after the words, before the words Alkain. So you know it's one verse, right? Because it says like verse 9, verse 7, what is it? He puts verse 8, verse 9, verse 10, verse 11. There's those verses. In chapter 20 of Exodus, he puts the citation there. But before Alkain, before it goes in bold, he puts that one dot. So between all the verses, he has two dots with numerals indicating it's a new verse. And then one dot, as we saw from the earlier print, before the word Alkain. So he actually covers all of his bases. Because if you look at this, you know it's not a new verse, because there's numerals indicating what the new verse is. And yet at the same time, he bolds Alkain, so you should know this is the primary text. So actually, if I'm correct, that he's commenting on his own print, he avoided Rabbi Naeh's issues from the start. Rabbi Naeh's issue that you're making people break a verse in half. Looking at his siddur, you know it's not a new. You know not to break the verse in half, because you know it's the middle of a verse, because there's numerals where the new verses are. Plus, he bolds it and he's talking about his own print. So if I'm correct, all of this stands well, and
He's also
gives me a little personal pride if I can vindicate my ancestor against what seems to be a very serious claim.
But it's very nice. He's avoiding Machlakut.
Yeah, well, Rabbi Noah lived a little bit later.
Yeah.
But
Rabbi
Lavut is my ancestor, and it's just a very serious question.
Yeah.
What are you saying is bold? Where's the bold?
Exactly.
That now that I have this insight, I think
Very interesting.
personal point of pride.
Can you
I'm allowed to
imagine?
take that.
It took his descendant to be able to.
It's just a little personal point of pride, if I'm allowed to.
Beautiful.
And I'm going to do a little more digging, and if I'm correct in this, I'm going to publish my thoughts if I'm correct.
Write an article.
That's the plan. I'm going to put it all. I'll try to find more printings and see if I can dig a little bit more. Really carve it out from all sides and see if I can.
There's a whole particular subject study just
On printings.
Exactly.
Yes, I was conversing with someone on that subject on Friday, and he's the one that pointed out to me that the Pri Etz Chaim says to begin with to start with Alkain. It doesn't say to say Kishesh, it says to say Alkain is number one. And he also pointed out to me, he was very strongly pushing to me that you can't rely on prints as anything. He was like, even if, like Rabbi Lavut is saying, you have to find printings in Al Tebas time. So let me find printings in Al Tebas time. And then I found one that doesn't say Alkain in bold. I was like disappointed, right? So this person was telling me, like, you can't rely on printers. They did whatever they wanted. In fact, that third printing from the fourth printing, Al Tebas in 1832, was done precisely because there was mistakes. So this whole claim that you have to find the earlier prints is like, he was like baffled by the whole conversation. And I think it's all settled when we understand that Rabbi Lavut's talking about his own print, because he did oversee his own print. That was the whole point. He wanted to oversee his own print so he can make a proper Siddur, which he titled Torah and ever since then, we rely on the Torah Siddur for the proper liturgy of the Siddur. Okay, our Siddur is called Tilat Hashem, but we still rely on Torah. The Rebbe used a Siddur called Torah. You ever seen the Rebbe carry that?
Which is your ancestors?
Which is my great grandfather.
Wow.
Who put that together.
Nobody uses his,
not the Rebbe put together the Siddur,
right.
but my great grandfather did research to put together a proper version of it, correcting the mistakes with his commentary Shara Kola that we learned last week, which is what I'm trying to defend that position. Anyway, I like to think I'm correct, and with Hashem's help, I'm going to do a little more work and publish my findings. But tomorrow, God willing, we'll get back to our Gemara. This will be the end of our Al-Kain tangent, inspired by Alan. Okay, wonderful day, Eden.
Thank you very
Hope
much.
you enjoyed it.
What time did you start today?
We started today about 8:20.
8:20?
So we started earlier. We started starting earlier. We're actually going all the way. We're going to all the way till 9.
What?
But we're going till 9 anyway.
You go till 9?
We're going till 9 anyway. Yeah. We're starting earlier. Just gives us more time. So
Excellent.
whenever you can come. It's been going 45 minutes basically every day. Last week.
Okay. I know I'll make it.
Kids are
Yeah.
all the very best to you all.
All right. Have a wonderful day.
Let's
Eden.
hope we should have a good,
Tomorrow we'll get back to the Gemara. Discussion of someone who missed Havdalah on Saturday nights. If they can make it on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, how
Up to
far they can
Wednesday.
take it. Till Wednesday, we'll learn math and then we'll look at the Shulchan Aruch and we'll continue.
All right, thank you.
Wonderful day. Eden.
Speaker bench. Thank you, Rebbe.